Well, welcome to the History Makers Leadership Podcast. Norival Trendaji here, ILI's Vice President for Training. Today we have a different setup because we are having a conversation with Martin Durham. He is the director of K180, a ministry dedicated to evangelism and leadership training in the UK and in different parts of the world. And Martin is ILI's international director for the continent of Europe. And today, we want to have a conversation on leadership, evangelism, and amazing things that God has been doing in Europe through the ministry that he helps to lead. Martin, how are you doing?
Doing well. Great to be here, Norival. Yes, a big hello from a unusually sunny London.
Well, you should be out there enjoying the sun because it's a little bit rare, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, Martin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? Did you grow up Christian? And how did you end up becoming a street evangelist?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I grew up just outside of London, about 50 miles north of London, from a good family, but not a family you would describe as Christian. And I ended up being part of a youth group that was connected to a church. Really interesting because I never remember hearing anything about Jesus at this youth group, even though it was connected to a church. But it was through the leaders of that youth group who invited me to what they called an activity week, which turned out to be a Christian activity week, where I first came under the sound of the gospel. And there was one young man particularly who would share his faith with me. And after a couple of years of being involved with that youth group and knowing this guy, I made a decision to follow Christ, and the first one in my immediate family anyway to make that decision. And I soon moved into London, and because the guy who led me to Christ belonged to a church in London, so it was about 50 miles away, and I started to travel there every weekend to attend that church. And I'm grateful to God as I look back for that friendship, because I don't think, well, I'm not sure where I would be today if I hadn't started attending that church, because I knew no believers in the area where I lived. And but there I was discipled. And and as I was discipled, I had this growing desire to share the gospel, growing desire to tell others about Jesus, and couldn't quite kind of work out what that looks like, except that I had this desire. And then one day we're in church, and we had the visit of a street preacher from America. He was just passing through, wasn't meant to be at our church, and but he invited some of us out on the street, said, let's go on the street, let's preach the gospel. And I thought, this is fascinating. You know, I'd never heard of this before. Really, I'd never seen a street preacher before. So we went to probably the busiest place, or one of the busiest places in central London, Leicester Square, set up a box, and he stood on this box and started to preach. And it's a really busy area, and people would gather around and start asking questions. And I was trying to look like I was doing something, like I was, talking to people. And I remember standing at a distance, and I stopped these two young men who were walking through Leicester Square. And it soon turned out, very, very quickly, I realized they were Christians, which is wonderful, because we started talking about football at that point and all sorts of other things. But from a distance, it looked like I was talking about Jesus. It looked like I was witnessing. And I remember talking to them. And as I'm talking to them over their shoulder, I could see the street preacher had stopped and was starting to walk towards us. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to be found out now that I'm not talking about Jesus. And he came over, and I introduced these two guys. I said, these two young guys passing through Leicester Square, but they're Christians. Fantastic. And the preacher said, that's amazing. he turned to those two guys and said, "It's great that you're Christians. Why don't you take it in turns to stand on the box and give your story?" And remember, Leicester Square, loads of people, and you saw the colour drain from their faces at this thought, and they started to make excuses. Oh, I remember one said, "I've got a train to catch. Maybe next time we're in London, we'll do it." And the preacher said, "Look, don't worry. I tell you what, Martin will do it first, and then you could do it." And my heart sank because I felt like I couldn't say no. And I had this long walk to this box in the corner of Leicester Square. There were people around the box waiting for someone to stand on it. And all I remember is I stood on this box, and I can't remember what I said, but what I do remember very clearly was God ignited a fire within me. Really, something ignited in that moment. And from that point,
Wow.
I had to go out and talk to people about Jesus, not always standing on a box, but really from the next week out on the local streets, trying to engage people and talk to them. And that was the starting point for me. And I was thankful for that little push, that little nudge and I wouldn't have done it otherwise. And it was God who ignited that fire. Changed. It was one of those defining moments that really changed the course of the ministry that God was
Wow.
calling.
That is really exciting. Well, first of all, the grace of God that reached you while you were sort of churched, but not quite a believer,
Yeah.
to bring you to faith. And then to put on the spot like that, it's probably how many a preacher got started, right? By
Yeah.
being put on the spot and made to preach. And then all of a sudden they realize sharing the gospel is the best thing ever.
Absolutely.
And but from standing up on a soapbox, if you will, to preach, to leading an organization that trains people to do that. In the middle of this, your life intersects with ILI. And I remember 2002, you were we we were both a lot younger,
A lot
right?
younger.
My
Yeah.
beard was a little gray, but not quite yet. And you probably had more hair back then than you have right now.
Indeed.
And we met at not very far from where we are, and you participated in the second ever international ILI training. And one of my memories from that is the promo video that we put out, where you give your testimony talking about how, and I can still hear you saying that mobilization had hit the nail in the head for you as a leader, and you learned about mobilization at that time. So since then, you have been very much involved with ILI. Give us a little bit about how that helped you or how that changed your life.
Yeah. Well, there's absolutely no question that the Lord used that time to not just solidify. It was a catalytic moment for me. Leading up to that point, that international conference, it was like I had jigsaw pieces in a jigsaw box, but no clear picture. I had a sense of what God was saying to me about a desire to preach the gospel. I had a sense because, and part of the testimony of our call is that my wife and I spent some time away on a prayer retreat, and God spoke to our hearts about leaving my banking career, and that He would open the doors of Europe as part of the ministry that we would be involved with. We knew no one in Europe really at that time, no one at all. It just seemed crazy, but we remember journaling it, writing it down. And then I had this invitation to come to the US and be part of that international conference. And it was a fantastic 2 weeks. I mean, I really soaked up all the teaching that was there and things like the mobilization, but so many other things. And one of the things that really impacted me was the whole teaching on vision. And what I remember most clearly, and it was a milestone in my life, where we had the teaching on vision, and then we were given 3 hours just to go and be alone with God. just to seek him about vision. And there I am with the kind of this picture of these jigsaw pieces in a jigsaw box. And I remember vividly, I was sitting on the veranda looking out into the woods, and I was just praying and asking God. I had a piece of paper next to me with a pen. And as I was looking out in the trees, and I could remember some of the things that had happened in my journey so far. And I remember writing down England on fire with the gospel. And at that point, though, it was like God said to me, not audibly, but it was so clear, no, Martin, look higher. And because I was looking at the trees, and so I looked up to the tree tops. And I just remember, literally, I just got my pen, crossed out England and put Europe, crossed out on fire and put ablaze. Europe ablaze with the gospel. And honestly, at that moment, it was like, it just dovetailed in my heart. I knew this was the picture of God's preferable future that he was giving to me. At that point, the ministry of K180 had not been born. I'd recently left the bank, but at that point, I was given a very, very clear vision of what God wanted for my life to work towards. Again, that picture of his preferable future. I didn't know what it looked like, but I did know that it looked like fires starting all over Europe, little fires. That's what it looked like in my mind. So so it was such a significant moment for me, that teaching on vision. That's why I was absolutely captured by the vision of ILI and History Makers. That's why it's still part of my life today, because even today, all over Europe, we see it. God using this training to transform lives and really accelerate the gospel. Because I saw it in my own life, and I see it in others today. So it was a very, very significant moment in my journey.
Wow. That is amazing. So K180, I remember as a curious side note, you had another name that you had to change because it was a little confusing. Something to do with a certain spy agency around the world. But K180 was born out of that vision. And today, you do more than just go out in the streets and preach. But before we go into I want you to tell us a little bit of what K180 does today. But before that, describe to me what a street evangelism, say, afternoon looks like. What is your strategy? What is it? How you do? Because a lot of people, I've seen street evangelists as everywhere. And some of them are hellfire and brimstone, fiery preachers that are shouting at people with usually with a megaphone or a microphone with one of those portable amplifiers. That's really more annoying than anything else. Not to mention they speak Christianese language that most people don't understand. So before people think you're one of them, describe to us, what does it look like when you go out and you do what you call street evangelism?
Yeah, and it was a very compelling call for me to go onto the streets and meet people where they are on their turf, so to speak. And for us, what it looks like today, well, we always take context into account, of course, depending on where we are. But let's take London, for an example. So every week we're out on the streets in London, lots of people, and we will set up, we'll have the box still, we'll have some music. And when I say music, someone will play guitar or something and sing just one song. We'll have someone give open air testimony for 2 minutes. What has Jesus done for them that no one else could do? And then we'll preach for 5 minutes. But the preaching and the testimony and the music, the question we're always asking ourselves is, how do we engage the people in front of us? What are they thinking when they're coming home on the train? What's on their mind? What's on the news today? You know, what's happening in culture that people are thinking about? Because we really want to engage. So even with our preaching, we use illustration. So we'll use sometimes a newspaper headline, or I've got a big inflatable globe that I use. And for example, I would start there by saying, big inflatable globe, and I was saying, you know, the world's a beautiful place, so many beautiful things, but there's also a lot of pain. And I use examples of war and death. So I asked the question, so how can it be then that God says he loves the world? And then just for a few minutes, share the gospel, you know, why we believe the scripture is true, that God loves the world. And so we have people stopping, they're caught by the illustration. We keep it short. And really the fruit comes in the conversation afterwards. The preaching is really scattering the seed, just throwing the seed out. But you have a team on the ground. As soon as we finished, they'll talk to people who have stopped. And I can honestly say, in all these years, 1996 is when we started on the street. And I can honestly say every single outreach that we've done, there's always been gospel conversations where we have been able to share the gospel to people who are listening. There is a hunger out there. And I think if we try and engage people, then there's a lot of apathy. But there are always people ready to talk. So that's how we approach it. Creative, passionate, biblical, and hopefully a way that's very engaging and draws people in.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you said, apathy. The majority of the people actually walk by as if you're invisible and don't produce any sound. But the ones who hear and engage, I love it how you started. You started this by not saying we go out to preach, but we go out to meet people.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's the secret. You were out there to meet people. I've heard once I made the comment that about these, and I've been with you on one of those in Spain, if you remember well. Yeah. We were, after our teaching on evangelism in the afternoon, we went out to the streets of, I don't remember, Jaén or one other Spanish city, and we did that. And to me, what I've always observed is that the evangelism happens in the periphery of the crowd, happen with those who are around. And I've seen members of the team engaging with people, asking them questions. Yeah. Is there how do you train the people that are on the team to engage? How do they engage with those who are paying attention or listening?
Yeah, so our approach is fairly straightforward. So because the presentation is reasonably short and sharp, as people stop, if they're listening, we let them listen. But as soon as we finish, so as a preacher, you would say at the end, if you would like to know more, I offer them something to read, we give away. But as soon as I've finished, our team know, because they're trained, they turn to someone who has stopped and say, oh, I'm with him. What did you think about what he was saying? And that's when the conversation really gets going. And that's where the fruit is, honestly. That's where, conversations go deep. They can go on to all different sorts of subjects, and people ask their real questions as well. And because we do it consistently, we go to the same place week after week after week, you soon build relationships with people, and people will come back.
That's an interesting aspect.
Absolutely. For me, when I think of street ministry, aside from prayer, of course, I think the most important thing is consistency. Go back. People will learn to trust you. They get to know you. I can give you countless testimonies of people who come back, who perhaps who have just walked past for even years and then suddenly stop because they have a problem in their life and they don't know who to turn to.
Yeah. Now, maybe there's somebody hearing us that says, well, that's interesting. I would like to try that. But I'm sure they always have the question, how about hecklers? Yeah. How about people who get aggressive or respond? I know that some people in this age of so much division are very offended by just the mention of the name of Jesus. So
I love hecklers, really. And because a heckler will help draw a crowd, actually. And you always remember when you're up front speaking, you're the one in control, so to speak. So you can choose whether to answer a question or not. And your team, we have people on the team who are trained to kind of come alongside a heckler, because if the heckler gets particularly, fruity language or something, then, or getting a bit close, one or two of our team will just stand alongside them. They know how to engage them. They'll start talking to them. But hecklers is not a bad thing. And the reason I like hecklers is not just because they draw a crowd. They're heckling for a reason. And there's often something going on in the background why they're so angry at God or so angry at the church. As if you can get them talking, and most of the time you can, just calmly, just ask them why they're so angry. Again, we've got plenty of testimonies. Some of the most fruitful conversations are with those who started by heckling, because it's stirring something, and you just want to get to the matter behind it. What's behind their reaction.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Hecklers are a good thing. So, now, like I said before, you have moved from that to doing a lot more. Tell me a little bit about what K180 does right now.
Yeah, and it's kind of grown over the years. But one thing I learned at ILI back there at the international conference, as I started teaching, is the importance of keeping the vision in front of you and not going off in all different directions. I learned that quite early. So we were always careful. I mean, we said no to a lot of things, basically. But what has opened up, early on, I was invited to help train some young evangelists in the UK. And that was through a connection with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. And I ended up helping to lead that initiative. And then K180 took it on for leading evangelists young evangelists in the UK, helping to teach, helping them to grow in those first steps of their understanding of what does it mean to be called as an evangelist, i.e. someone who will boldly proclaim the gospel, but also mobilize the body of Christ in sharing their faith. And we expanded the vision there to invite young evangelists from across Europe. And very quickly that grew. So today across Europe, we have something which we call the European Young Evangelist Network, working in partnership with different people we've known for many years, different ministries. But we take the lead there and training young evangelists. I say young, in their 20s, sensing the call. So we're coming alongside the local church. We passionately believe that the church is God's plan A. So we want to serve the church. So everything we do, we trust, is for the benefit of the church, training young evangelists who will work out their ministry predominantly in the local church setting. And it's a thrilling thing, really, to be investing in these young adults who hear that call, and want to make a difference with their lives, and to be able to invest in them alongside others. We work in partnership. We're always inviting different people to come and speak, but it's a journey with them. And this is important. Again, I learned this from ILI. It's a journey. We don't just do a one-off conference with them. We do a 2-year journey, 4 residential weekends with some very practical mission opportunities in between, often going to different European cities, and then have a graduate initiative afterwards. And that was all learned through ILI. So that's for K180. These are our main streams really now. The creative street ministry, which is right at the heart still every week. ILI history makers teaching and leading the ministry across Europe, and the European Young Evangelist Network. And just to add one other thing, because it's just come about in the last few years, which I think is one of the most exciting things that we've been involved with, where just before COVID, the London Baptists approached us asking whether we would consider helping Baptist churches grow their evangelistic culture, because so many churches are struggling with this. We put a proposal together, which was accepted. In 2021, we started, and where we spend 12 months alongside a church, place a trainee evangelist in the church for a couple of days a week. So one of the trainee evangelists that we're training, plus there's other components to it, and teaching and going out on the street is a key part of it. And it's been an amazing journey. And we've been partnering with one church a year up until this point, but now we're about to start with 4 churches, and we have another 4 churches who are wanting to partner. And
Wow.
I sense this is an important moment, really. It's not that we have all the answers at all, and I say this to the church leaders,
Mm-hmm.
but we can bring some intentionality. We can bring some help and serve them. So I'm excited about that. We call it the journey, and that's one of our new things, but it all ties in with the overall vision.
Great, great. Well, there's nothing helps revitalize a church more than started, evangelizing and seeing new believers um, mess up the order, if you will,
Yeah.
of the congregation. Well, this is really exciting, and I have, we've always heard, let's say, bad news about the state of the church, the state of Christianity in the UK. It's something that's been brewing for quite a long time. There's an anti-Christian bias in the media and in a lot of areas of the country. Talk to us a little bit about how do you see? I mean, you're out on the streets every day, so you see uh, the state of your country and even Europe today. What does it look like, um, to be a Christian in the UK and Europe?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, of course, but I mean, Europe has about 745 million people, and latest statistics would say about, well, conservatively, 2% would be Bible-believing Christians across Europe. So on the face of it, there's it's barren on the face of it. There are pockets of good things happening, of course, but it's difficult. In many countries, you're talking about 1% kind of Bible-believing Christians, evangelical churches. But God's not finished with the church in Europe, I'm sure. And it's interesting on the streets, because the thing that I love about being on the streets is you really have your finger on the pulse. And I think, to a point anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the number one objections from people is the church and their stereotypical picture of the church, or what they've heard of the church, sometimes their experience of church as well in the past. But people generally haven't rejected Jesus, which is, it's an interesting thing, really. So, and we're always there. We're preaching Christ, of course. And I think that's why often people engage. We're not preaching church, although we always talk about how important church is. And, but it is interesting that is, in my experience, the number one objection from people.
Mm-hmm.
But often it's a stereotypical picture. It's not something they've necessarily experienced. Culture, there's no question culture in the UK has drifted and is drifting further and further away from Christ as far as institutions are concerned, legislation, media, a gradual drifting away. But we still have a great deal of freedom. At the moment, they have tried to curtail that freedom. But it's interesting,
Mm-hmm.
number of street preachers have been arrested over the years, but none of them have been charged because we still have this freedom of speech.
Right.
So, there are challenges, there's no doubt. Norovan, I think that the biggest thing is still secularism. People talk about Islam and stuff, and of course that, there is the growth of Islam, but I think apathy, secularism, comfortable with our lives generally is still the biggest challenge, that I just don't care sort of thing.
Well,
yeah.
It's interesting. Just this week, I'm hearing an interview with Nick Gembel, and that's the founder of the Alpha Ministry, and two other pastors from London. Actually, one has a large church in East London that is it, and it's a parish church. It's a Church of England parish that has grown, and so We've also had access to the research by the English
Yeah.
Bible Society about what they're calling the quiet revival.
Yeah.
Uh, give us a little bit on that from your
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. It's a good question. Of course, we've heard about it, keep hearing about it. I think cautiously optimistic may be my take on it. I think it, we have to be careful with statistics, don't we? And
Mhm.
if you look closely at the reports, certainly there was a survey done. I think it was 13,000 people surveyed by a secular, one of these survey bodies, and 2,000 responded saying that they go to church at least once a month, which was an increase on the last time they did a survey, a notable increase. Which, okay, that's good. But of course, these surveys, people complete the survey if they want to, they don't have to. But also the report talks about increase and a notable increase in attendance in the last 6 years in the Church of England, the Catholic Church. But the issue there is that the Church of England and the Catholic Church at the same time have reported decreases. So, I don't want to be pessimistic about it because I do generally think there's some sort of stirring. You hear about things anecdotally. I've not seen anything up front, close and personal, if you like in our home church or churches that I know, but we are hearing some things. But then there always has been in history. I mean, when I first became a Christian, our youth group was swelling in numbers. I mean, we had huge youth group. People were coming to Christ, but we never talked about revival. And is there such a thing as a quiet revival? I don't know, but I do think there are some positive things. And interestingly, to share one story here, after I was looking at the report, I mean, just literally, I think it was a day later or 2 days later, one of the young men that works in our ministry was on the underground, the tube, on the phone talking to a church. And it was obvious he was talking to a church. Finished his call. A young man next to him, so 28-year-old guy next to him said, were you talking about church? And he said, yeah, I was. He said, well, it's just that I've started reading the Bible and I would like to know more about who Jesus is. So he was able to share and invite him to church. This man came to church. 2 weeks later, made a decision to follow Christ and being discipled now. And it was almost like the Lord saying to me, well, maybe there is something stirring. And maybe in culture as well, if I could just add this word, because you do have people like Jordan Peterson who are kind of speaking directly to the hearts of young men, really, and in a conservative way. And and pointing to Christianity in some respects. And you've got a generation of young people, and I'm talking about young, sort of, let's say Gen Z, as we would say, Gen Z, whose parents, by and large, are not believers. So they're not believers, but they're pretty apathetic, and so when you're talking to young people, they've not got any sort of necessary Christian baggage. It's almost sometimes you've got a clean sheet of paper, and it's almost like they want to know. And when you talk to some of these young people on the street, it's interesting that they could see that things aren't working. The things that culture is saying, this is how we should be, and all the gender stuff and all that. The young people aren't stupid. They can see that this does not make sense. It's not working. So they're looking for something else. And I think that potentially is why we're seeing more interest in spiritual things and certainly in the things of Christ. And so we are, I think, seeing more interest from that age group. And we do see it a bit on the streets as well. So yes, that's why I say I'm cautiously optimistic that there is something, I describe it as something stirring from where I sit anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how could we be prepared for that? Speaking as an evangelist, but also one who equips. You know, I mean, you are seriously committed to equipping leaders of character as well. So how could we what could we do to respond if there is a stirring up, if Gen Z, if as you said, is interested?
Well,
Give us some pointers.
well, firstly, one of the challenges we have, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, certainly in America, is that you've got all this internal fighting in church, in denominations, which is really, this is tearing denominations apart. I don't need to say anything on that. We see that, and so sometimes it's difficult as an evangelist when you're sharing the gospel and you're kind of pointing people, of course, to Christ, but you're pointing to the body of Christ, and you can see, and people can see, it's in the news all the time. It's in a mess as far as the media is concerned, but it's his body, it's his church. And I think the big to answer your question directly, I suppose when you look at what potentially is happening, this stirring, the one prayer is that you hope this isn't just a cool thing to do for a young person, but it will lead to radically transformed lives, which then comes back to the discipleship issue. And it is an issue. Even in the last 2 weeks, I think I've had 3 church leaders ask us, can we help with the whole discipleship piece? Not that we have the answers, but it's making the point that we are struggling in this, I think, not just this generation, in recent generations, as a general statement. This doesn't apply to everyone, but discipleship has been a real struggle. And so you even have a generation of believers sitting in churches who have not been discipled. I tell you, when we train these young leaders, history makers, young evangelists through the European Young Evangelist Network, one of the questions I ask when it comes to multiplication and discipling, I ask the group, how many of you have been discipled? It is always less than 50%, normally less than 30%, always without fail. And I see that. And so you realize if there's an issue we have to grapple with now, it's the discipleship piece. So when these young men, women come to Christ, how are we teaching them to be followers of Christ? Not by just going on a course or whatever, but what does discipleship look like? And I think this is the big need. We dare not miss this. It shouldn't just be for this time, of course. I mean, this is, Jesus said, make disciples. So it should be fundamental to us. And that's why I love ILI. Nothing new. That's why I love ILI. We give a focus on that. But yeah, I think that's absolutely the key thing we have to grapple with and seize this moment. Because otherwise it will just be a cool fad. And I mean, I don't want to equate God out of it, but we know he calls us to disciple. So if we're not doing it, who is?
Well, like I said, I've been thinking about this. Is just the new TikTok, the new thing on on the young people's lives. But even if it is a new fad, the moment they encounter with the living God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, it ceases being a fad and becomes life transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. But we still have this responsibility, don't we, where Jesus said, make disciples. And so if we're not taking that responsibility seriously, of course, God can sustain and keep people in the faith, but there's no but to that. He can. And yet he has given us the model and the pattern. So.
Right. He has, but that's not the model he created for it. It's kind of like a plan B. Well, Martin, anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to say, or any insight for our listeners and for those watching
I think
our
we've
video?
Covered most things. I think there's always great hope, isn't there? We can talk about challenges. I really do like to see those as opportunities. And I suppose the one thing that God has impressed on my heart recently is just keep things simple. The gospel is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. And the danger is sometimes for all of us, we try and be too clever, come up with new gimmicks and new ways of doing things and new strategies. Yeah. It's almost like he's been impressing on my heart. Keep it simple. The power is in the gospel. And so we preach the gospel, preach his word, He will do the rest. He's the one that changes lives, and
Right.
we just need to be
Mhm.
faithful with what He's put in our hands. And I think if there's one takeaway from me at the moment, it's keep it simple. Walk in obedience. Do what He's called us to do. Don't be influenced by the culture so much that we change things. Just bring the relevancy of the gospel to this culture, because the gospel is always relevant. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Martin. That is awesome. That was a great conversation. Now, if anybody would like to connect with you, get to know more about K180, give us your social or your email and all our
Yeah, probably
website and
website's
all
the
of
best
that.
place to go to initially. K180.org. Easy to remember, K180.org. And of course, we're on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah,
Yeah, we'll add them to the
yeah.
show notes. We'll add the links to the show notes and to the video description as well. Martin, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your insights. It's always exciting to hear what God's been doing through you, through all the leaders and the teams at K180. Um, History Makers podcast is the podcast of the International Leadership Institute. Um, we exist to equip leaders to spread the gospel. And so if you're interested, go to iliteam.org, check us out. Please help us by making a comment, leaving your likes, and helping us to spread and even share our videos and our podcast so that we can reach a larger audience. Thanks for watching. God bless you.